Tonight, we begin in the rowdy, smoky, and slightly sticky world of the medieval tavern. The unsung heart of every town, the unofficial news center, and the only place where a knight, a peasant, and a bard can all get equally drunk and equally pickpocket. This is not just a place to drink. It's a place where danger, laughter, and disease mingle freely beneath a thatched roof. It's loud, it's filthy, and somehow it's perfect. So before you get comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you really like what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always fun to see who's joining us from all over the world. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for a gentle hum. And now, let's go on a journey together tonight. You're here. You've trudged down a muddy street that smells like a blend of horse, smoke, and questionable soup that of course it's raining, or just stopped. Everything is slippery, including your only pair of shoes, which are now soaked through and threatening to dissolve. You're cold. You're tired. You're hungry. You were nearly run over by a turnip cart. Twice. Maybe a goose is trying to bite you. You need shelter. You need a drink. You need a tavern. And that's where you are now. Soaked, shivering, and standing in the middle of the street with nothing but desperation and the faint hope that somewhere, just around the corner, is the warm, chaotic, barely functional embrace of a medieval tavern. So how do you find a pub in a medieval town? No glowing signs, no Yelp reviews, no GPS. You can't find a pub in a medieval town by sight. You can only find it by ear, guided by noise. Somewhere beyond the clatter of the blacksmith's hammer and the fishmonger's shout about his fresh river eel, you hear it. A peal of laughter, someone shouting, and an overly aggressive voice singing about a goose. It doesn't sound right, and that's how you know you're close. And then you see it. A warped wooden building that leans slightly, as if even the architecture has had too much of it. It looks like it's been held together by mud, stubbornness, and spilled beer. There's a wooden sign hanging out front on rusty hinges. The paint has long since faded into something that might be a barrel or a bear, or maybe both. Either way, it's unreadable. But here it is. Welcome to the pub. The front steps are slippery with beer, and when you push open the heavy iron door, a stream flows out, so long and impressive that it's a form of entertainment in itself. And then you're inside. The cold night is still outside. The warmth, the smells, the noise, all of it comes at once. You've crossed over. This isn't just a place to rest. This is a whole other world. And you've just entered. It hits you the moment you step inside. Not a gentle waft, but a full-bodied assault. The smell. It hits you like the handshake of a drunk uncle. Warm, thick, and extremely personal. First comes the smoke. Thick, lazy, and not really going anywhere. It just hangs there, hovering under the low ceiling. Then the wool, wet cloaks steaming from the rain. Then the ale. Sour, warm, and flung freely across nearly every surface. And finally, the meat. Unidentifiable. Possibly chicken. Possibly cat. Possibly both. It's less of a scent and more of a memory you're going to have to live with. Your eyes adjust slowly. The tavern is dim, lit by stubby candles stuck into bottles, bones, or crusted over wall brackets. The ceiling is low enough to make tall men stoop and drunk men bleed. The floor is dirt, not in the poetic sense, actual dirt, covered in straw that's more decorative suggestion than hygiene. The tables are old, scarred, and carved with generations of initials and knife marks. The benches are warped and wobbly. Someone is passed out in the middle of the room, spoon still in hand. No one moves. A one-eyed dog is chewing a bone under a table. It may have come from a plate. It may have come from something else. And then the sound. It's not one sound. It's all of them. Laughter, shouting, coughing, slurred singing, a tankard slamming. Someone telling a story they're too drunk to finish. Somewhere, something breaks. No one reacts. This is the tavern. Loud or closed due to fire. This, dear traveler, is the pulse of medieval life. Not lutes and candlelight and noble feasts, but smoke, noise, filth, and the warm buzz of survival. It's overwhelming. It's disgusting. It's alive. And somehow, It feels exactly right. It's not just the smell or the noise. It's the people. The walking, slurring, half-sleeping cast of characters that make this place feel less like a tavern and more like a live-action disaster play no one ever rehearsed. A man is passed out at a table, spoon still in hand, his head gently bobbing with the rhythm of someone's foot kicking underneath the bench. Another man stumbles sideways into someone else's lap, stays there a moment too long, then stands up like it never happened. Across the room, two men are arguing loudly about a stolen chicken, or maybe a borrowed one. Either way, nobody steps in. Nobody wants to. Nobody's judging anyone. Mostly because nobody can stand straight long enough to care. This isn't the place for etiquette or self-awareness. This is the place where you can shout mid-bite, sleep mid-sentence, or chew on something that might have belonged to a dog, and not one person will blink. There is no structure here. No assigned tables, no menus, no host. But there's still a kind of order. The bard knows which corner gets the most drunk listeners. The traveling merchant knows to sit near the fire. It makes him look more successful. And the man spoiling for a fight always chooses a seat near the door. Easier to escape, or be thrown out. It's chaos. But it's a familiar kind of chaos. One that almost feels safe. Not elegant, not polite, but known. This is the social warmth of the Middle Ages. Dirty, loud, unpredictable, but strangely comforting. Like a dysfunctional family dinner where everyone's had 6 Alish and no one remembers why they came. And for tonight, you're part of it, whether you like it or not. There is no bar. Not really. No polished countertop. No rows of gleaming bottles. No stools for polite sipping. Instead, there's a thick, battered plank of wood laid across 2 barrels. That's it. That's the bar. That's the command center, the help desk, the entire operational core of the tavern. And it's slightly sticky. Always slightly sticky. Behind it stands the innkeeper. Not just a bartender. Not just a server. This is the unchallenged ruler of the establishment. They pour drinks with one hand, shout at the guy passed out in the corner with the other, and track debts, bans, and bad behavior entirely from memory. No notebooks, no ledgers, just sheer spite-fueled recall. Their voice can silence a room. Their glare can end a brawl. They don't wear a crown, but if you ask around, no one runs this place but them. There is no menu, no reservations, no bills to settle with the swipe of a card. Everything here runs on instinct, volume, and vague tradition. You want a drink? Yell for it. You want a seat? Drag one over. You want to leave quietly? That's adorable. Good luck. And the building itself? Low ceiling, thick walls, tiny windows covered in something that might be wax or might be regret. But it works. The low roof traps the heat. The thick stone keeps out the wind and muffles the shouting. A little. The dim lighting? Perfect. You can see your cup. Not always your neighbor's face, which honestly helps. It's crude. It's loud. Shouldn't work. But it does. The tavern runs not on structure, but on memory, volume, and the force of will of the person behind the plank. If the tavern is a body, then the innkeeper is both the brain and the spine, and probably the liver, too. You don't meet the tavern keeper. You encounter them. If it's a man, he's shaped like a barrel with arms, broad-shouldered, hunched slightly forward like a barn door that's been through too many winters. His skin is the color of smoked meat with a texture to match. His hands wrap around a tankard like he's holding someone's skull. And he probably has. He doesn't smile. He evaluates. You ask for ale. He decides whether you deserve it. If it's a woman, and often it is, she's not large. She doesn't need to be. One look from her could drop a knight to his knees and silence a bard mid-verse. Her eyes are knives. Her tone is law. She knows who lied, who owes, and who tried to flirt with her niece last Tuesday. She doesn't shout. She doesn't need to. The room just obeys. There is no ledger, no coin box, no chalkboard of debts. There's only memory. Living, breathing, slightly terrifying memory. She remembers your face from 3 Tuesdays ago, and the chicken leg you didn't pay for. He recalls exactly how many Alish you had last market day and how many of them ended up on the floor. They track everything. Who's welcome, who's not, who needs to be watched. and who should probably leave before the stool flies. Their voice is a thunderclap wrapped in sarcasm. Their presence is somewhere between priest and warlord. They pour, they judge, they discipline. They are the gravity that keeps the tavern from flying off the rails, and the heat that makes it worth staying. You don't just buy a drink from the tavern keeper. You earn the privilege of being served. Without them, the place is just wood, straw, and spilled regrets. With them, it's alive, and you behave because they said so. You're thirsty, but in a medieval tavern, that's not a craving. It's a dare, because every drink you pick isn't just about flavor. It's about survival. Start with ale, the most common choice and also the most treacherous. It arrives in a mug as murky as forgotten dishwater. The taste? Imagine tree bark soaked in regret. It's bitter, it bites, and it might leave something in your mouth that you didn't order. A piece of sediment, a mystery chunk, or the feeling of a memory you wish you could undrink. It's not just ale. It's an experience. It stains your beard, your clothes, and occasionally your dignity. Then comes mead. Honey, water, time, and danger. Sweet at first, but it finishes like fire. And not the cozy kind. More like kissing a dragon. Or, as one traveler put it, like kissing someone in the dark and praying it's not the village blacksmith. Good mead is divine. Bad mead is a hex in liquid form. The problem? You don't know which one you're getting until it's too late. Cider? Yes, fermented apple juice. But not apples from the tree. No, these are fallen soldiers, bruised, wormy, or already halfway to vinegar. The taste smacks you sour, slaps you dry, and then charms you into sipping again. It's for the folks who enjoy pain with their pleasure, and who probably chew on pine cones for fun. Wine is rare, and when it does appear, it's already been insulted, watered down, spiced up, or simply left to think too long about its purpose in life. It's not the Instagram swirl and sip kind. It's the cough then lie to yourself kind. And water? You fool. That's not a beverage. That's a death wish. Unboiled, untreated, and full of bacteria that haven't met penicillin yet. Drinking water in a tavern is like wrestling a bear in the dark. Brave, foolish, and possibly legendary. So drink, traveler. But know this, in this place, thirst is never your biggest problem. Food in a medieval tavern wasn't about flavor. It wasn't about choice. It was about one question. Will this make me sick or not? Start with pottage, the eternal stew. It's not cooked from scratch. It never starts fresh. The pot, never washed, just reheated, refilled, and remembered by smell. Into it goes whatever still looks edible. Wilted greens, cracked grains, bone scraps, and the occasional mystery meat that may or may not be rat. The taste? Undefined. Not because it's bad, but because no two bowls are ever alike. Pottage has no recipe. It has a history. Utensils? Optional. Knives were personal. Travelers brought their own, mostly for eating, sometimes for stabbing. Spoons were rare, sacred, or stolen. You might borrow one. You might whittle one from a branch. Or you might just dive in with your fingers and embrace the primal experience. And then we get to the ancient artifacts of the medieval meal. Bread and cheese. The bread? Hard as a forgotten brick. It doubles as a weapon or a ladle. The cheese? Aromatic in the worst sense, like a wet boot left in a barn. Could nourish, or it could knock out your sense of smell. Other options include salted eggs and dried fish. Tasty when fresh. Potentially lethal when aged beyond recognition. Every bite is a risk. Every meal a gamble. You don't eat food here, you test fate. This wasn't culinary art. It was edible survival. And yet, it fed a world. Laughable? Yes. Dangerous? Definitely. But it reminds us. Clean water, soft bread, and real forks aren't just luxuries. They're miracles. So the next time you complain about your meal, just be grateful it doesn't come with a side of bacteria and existential dread. Inside every medieval tavern, a whole theater came to life. As firelight flickered across stone walls, familiar faces reappeared night after night. Not to perform, but to live as loudly and honestly as possible. The scent of ale, bursts of laughter, slurred shouting, and yes, even snoring, wove together into the unmistakable soundtrack of the tavern. There were the farmers, pillars of the village by day, drunken furniture by night. You'd find one snoring into his bowl of lukewarm pottage, muttering about last year's failed harvest, sometimes cradling a live chicken like a drinking buddy. Then came the merchants, bragging at full volume about mythical trade deals, selling salt to Norwegians, exchanging silk with Arab princes, none of which could be verified, but made for great background noise. Soldiers followed, always halfway through a story about slaying 6 bandits single-handedly, though halfway through the tale they'd usually start nodding off. In the darkest corner, without fail, sat the hooded stranger, silent, still, face hidden, one hand on a mug. No one knew their name and no one dared ask. Every tavern had one, and if you don't remember seeing them, maybe it was you. Then came the kids, the gamblers, and the barred agents of chaos. Children darted between tables, chasing each other or the dog, occasionally begging for scraps or serving as pint-sized spies. Gamblers played with marked cards, argued when caught cheating, got thrown out, and inevitably came back. The bard usually had 3 strings left on his lute, sang off-key, but as long as he hit one crowd favorite, he was tolerated, or at least not kicked. And the women, never underestimate them. Some were servers, sharp-tongued, fast-footed, capable of catching both flying mugs and wandering hands. Others were in business of another sort, just don't ask unless you've paid first. But all of them knew everything. Who owed what, who was lying, and who was about to start a fight. Sometimes they were the ones who lit the match. In a tavern, there are no spectators. Everyone is a character. And if you walk through that door, the only question is, which one would you be? The sound of a medieval tavern isn't music, not in the traditional sense. It's a full-blown, unscripted, slightly offensive symphony. There's no conductor, no rhythm, and certainly no harmony, but somehow it plays on. And if you listen long enough, it starts to make sense. There's the clinking of mugs, short, sharp, constant, like the tavern's version of applause. It happens for no reason at all and every reason at once. Then comes the laughter. One man snorts like a piglet, another lets out a laugh that sounds suspiciously like a goat being strangled, and someone else is laughing alone. At a spoon. Not with it. At it. Suddenly a yell. It might be someone shouting for more pottage. Or it might be someone challenging a stranger to a duel over an accidental glance. You won't know until the chairs start flying. And then the fart. Not a subtle one. A triumphant, echoing declaration that rips through the noise like a trumpet solo. The bard stops playing. Conversation freezes. And then, thunderous applause. Welcome to the only place where flatulence earns a standing ovation. But what's most remarkable is this. No one minds the noise. No one rolls their eyes, because everyone is part of it. This sound, chaotic, crude, and unrelenting, is the heartbeat of the tavern. If it ever fell silent, something would be wrong. The tavern isn't just a place. It's a living organism. And every mug slam, every laugh snort, every shout and accidental trumpet solo, that's its breath. That's its voice. And tonight, it sings just for you. Welcome to the medieval casino, where the dice are crooked, the rules are imaginary, and someone just bet a goat. At the center of it all, dice made from bone. Uneven, chipped, and suspiciously blessed by some forest spirit. Every roll is a prayer. The playing cards, missing corners, ink smudged, half the suit's gone. If someone pulls out the 5 of spades, don't argue, they win. Always. The rules? Never written down. They shift like the wind and typically favor whoever's currently winning. Think you understand the game? That's adorable. In here, the winner writes the rules retroactively. But gambling isn't just about money. In fact, that's the least exciting currency in a tavern. People bet boots, often only one, rusty daggers, love letters, half-eaten sausage links, even live chickens. The stakes escalate quickly. Lose big, and you might hear, "All right then, you wash dishes for the next 7 nights." That's right. This is the only place on earth where you can lose your dignity and your dinner in a single hand. Then come the games of glory and shame. Arm wrestling, brutal, loud, and often sticky, especially if someone knocked over the honey mug. Drinking contests, no winners, just a room full of equally defeated warriors lying sideways. And the fan favorite, stupid dares. Whoever does the dumbest thing wins. Last week's champion? The guy who bit straight into a week-old bread brick and still had all his teeth. As for the losers, there's no exit march. Just a gentle drag under the table, a pillow of hay, and a spoon stuck in your hair so no one trips over you. This isn't just chaos. It's ritualized mayhem. A raw, hilarious glimpse into a world where everyone's a player, no one's truly safe, and the only guaranteed outcome is a story worth retelling. In the medieval tavern, storytelling wasn't just a pastime, it was a competitive sport. And the bard? He was the unofficial ringmaster. His lute had only 3 strings left, and his repertoire maxed out at 5 tales. But that didn't matter. Night after night, he told the same stories with such flair that no one cared. He once claimed he married a mermaid, tamed a dragon with a lullaby, and single-handedly silenced an entire Viking raid using only a whistle. No one believed a word, but somehow everyone listened. And by the next night, someone had added, "Did you know the dragon was wearing a crown?" But it wasn't just the bard. Every drinker was a myth-maker. Old soldiers recalled slaying demons, or at least something that looked like a drunk donkey. Merchants told of swimming from England to France to escape taxes. One man swore his cat could speak. It told him to stop drinking, so naturally he cooked it. Each retelling doubled the absurdity and halved the truth. The goal wasn't accuracy. It was applause. Truth had no business here. What mattered was the delivery. Speak slow, drop your voice to a gravelly growl, and kick your feet onto the table. Instant credibility. But slip up, fumble a detail, or sound unsure. Expect a loaf of week-old bread hurled at your head. The kind that doubles as masonry. In this world, style was currency. The better the liar, the longer the legend. The tavern wasn't a place for facts. It was a birthplace of legends, Netflix before Netflix, with ale instead of popcorn. And in this ancient theater, the best storytellers outlived the strongest warriors, because their names were etched not in stone, but in memory. In the medieval tavern, flirting was a risky sport, fueled by mead, poor judgment, and a total lack of boundaries. Compliments ranged from, "You smell like honey," to, "You smell like a campfire made of damp straw." Oddly sincere, if slightly concerning. Some tried to impress by twirling a knife mid-conversation. Was it seduction? Was it a threat? No one could say. In this place, every gesture could mean, "I love you," or "I'm about to hit you." Sometimes both. Outcomes varied wildly. A lucky soul might get a kiss, unexpected, blurry, and never remembered the next morning. Others weren't so fortunate. A misjudged line could earn a slap loud enough to turn heads 3 tables over. Some, robbed mid-flirt, would wake up convinced they'd been admired, not mugged. Love and pickpocketing. 2 arts practiced side by side, often mistaken for each other. And yet, even in this chaos, real love occasionally found a way. Like the baker who shared half a boiled potato with the stonecutter. No words, just a nod and a shared sip of warm mead. Medieval love had no tinder, just a glance across steam rising from soup. These moments were rare, but they lingered, small pockets of warmth in the din. This final act in the tavern's theater softens the madness, showing that beneath the shouting, gambling, and exaggerated tales, hearts still beat, some for romance, some for mischief, all touched by the same intoxicated hope that maybe, just maybe, tonight would be different. It was chaos, yes, but every laugh, every song, every wild-eyed toast carried with it the strange and human dream that even in a noisy, smoky mess, love might still find you, or at least throw a potato your way. Every medieval tavern night had an unofficial grand finale, the brawl. Not planned, not polite, but as predictable as spilled ale. It could start from anything. A stolen chair, a tilted dice roll, or an offhand joke about someone's wife's beard. Sometimes just breathing too loud was enough. In the tavern, reasons are optional. Reflexes are mandatory. And then chaos. No warnings. No duels at dawn. Just the sudden clatter of benches flying and men screaming things like, "That was my spoon!" Someone wielded a broken stool leg like a knight's sword. Another hurled a rock-hard loaf of bread with lethal intent. One poor chicken, caught mid-escape, became both weapon and casualty. Dogs barked, tankards flew, and through it all the bard, unfazed, kept strumming. He knew better than to stop the music. The tavern keeper? A legend. One hand held a soup ladle, the other, a wooden mace. They didn't stop the fight, they conducted it. You too, not near the shelves. You, stop hitting with the candle. Authority was absolute. Not because of strength, but because everyone owed them money. The most feared figure in the room ran the tab. Just as quickly as it began, it ended. A few ripped sleeves, a busted lip, and suddenly everyone was friends again. Hugs were exchanged. Tankards refilled. Some even broke into song off-key, off-rhythm, but unified. Grudges didn't last, but nicknames did. John the Purple-Faced. Rick One Shoe. Badge of honor. It was madness, but not malice. Wild, but never wicked. The tavern fight was performance art. Slapstick, sweaty, and somehow bonding. It closed the night not with a whimper, but a bang. A punchline written in bruises and laughter. A perfectly chaotic end to a perfectly medieval evening. At the end of all the shouting, singing, gambling, flirting, and flying furniture, comes the soft collapse. The moment when even the most resilient tavern soul must surrender to sleep. But don't let the word sleep fool you. If you had coin, you might be lucky enough to rent a room, which meant a corner of itchy straw beneath the rafters, shared with strangers, chickens, or something vaguely snoring in the dark. Everyone clutched a dagger beneath their pillow. Not out of paranoia, just tradition. In medieval terms, private room means you're at least allowed to know who's snoring next to you. If you were broke, and let's face it, most were by midnight, you'd claim a spot by the hearth, roll up your cloak, and lay your head on a boot. You didn't choose your neighbor, the local tavern dog did. If he curled beside you, you'd stay warm. If not, good luck. Just pray you didn't pass out next to the guy who exhaled smoke like a chimney all night. You won't freeze, unless your bunkmate thinks exhaling pipe fumes counts as affection. And yet, somehow, in all the mess, the snores in chorus, the crackle of dying embers, the occasional hiccup or mysterious thud, there was peace. No one stole. No one stabbed. Everyone was too tired to remember their grudges. A strange, honest safety filled the air. No luxury, no silence, but a shared exhaustion that felt, somehow, like home. It was ugly, cramped, loud, and it worked. A fitting close to a tavern night. From chaos to calm, from madness to mutual surrender. No silk sheets, just straw, shadows, and a strange sense of belonging. Morning in the tavern doesn't arrive gently. It staggers in, smelling of smoke, stale ale, and burnt bread. The fire has long died, but the air still hangs thick with last night's laughter and something vaguely sour. Breadcrumbs, patches of straw, and mysterious sticky spots litter the floor like the battlefield aftermath of a feast. The tavern keeper, already sweeping, already fuming, glares at the sleeping bodies like a judge surveying the guilty. Some don't remember when they fell asleep. Some don't remember who they are. Breakfast is less a meal and more an alchemical experiment. Last night's pottage is revived, reboiled, rediluted, and seasoned with whatever survived. Ale is mixed with water, rebranded as a cleansing tonic. Those who rise early get a bowl, a grunt, and if they're lucky, a half-smile from the keeper that says, "You're alive, for now." Guests begin checking their inventory. Purses, empty. Boots, mismatched or missing. Knives? If you've still got yours, congratulations, you're a suspect. In this world, the only proof of honor is survival, and maybe a story to tell. And stories begin immediately. Every groan turns into a brag. Someone swears they beat 3 men in arm wrestling. Someone else insists a mysterious stranger tried to kiss them, or rob them, depending on the retelling. No story is accurate. Every story is believed. By noon, the tavern has returned to its usual rhythm. The chaos is swept, simmered, and swallowed. But you can feel it brewing again, because here the cycle never ends. One night closes with a lie, and the next begins with a drink. A place that smells like regret, sounds like snoring, and somehow still feels like home. In a world where cold rain seeps through every crack and power belongs to the few, the tavern was not just a place to drink. It was the only warm heartbeat in the middle of a frozen system. Disease raged, wars dragged on, hierarchies crushed people under silence. But in the tavern, you didn't need a name, a title, or a purpose. Just a seat, a story, and a thirst. You didn't need a reason to enter, but when you left, you always carried something with you. Even if it didn't have a name, it was a space of strange equality, where a farmer could argue with a knight, and no one cared who your father was. People came to trade grain, share rumors, find a friend, or a fight. They laughed to forget, drank to remember, and survived another day, together. It wasn't a church. It wasn't a battlefield. But somehow it held the honesty of both. And no, it wasn't perfect. The floor was sticky, the air thick, the danger real. But it was real. No performances, no polite masks, just people, flawed and loud, colliding like atoms in a heated stew. In a world that told you how to behave, this was a place you could finally breathe and maybe be yourself. Maybe the Middle Ages are gone. But aren't we still looking for our own taverns? That cafe where someone remembers your name. That group chat that feels like home. That moment where you're just human. So, would you walk into a medieval tavern? And if you did, would you ever leave quite the same? Like, subscribe if you'd stumble in for another night. And tell me, who would you be in the crowd? Behind a thick pane of glass at the Neues Museum in Berlin, under a soft, golden light that feels like a sunset captured in time, a face gazes outward, serene, regal, and unshaken. The bust of Nefertiti, carved from limestone, delicate in form but immense in presence. It commands silence. High cheekbones sculpted by shadow, a slender neck that rises with the poise of sovereign authority. The signature blue crown, elegant, unwavering, evokes a power that does not shout, yet cannot be denied. But it is the eyes that hold you, calm, distant, and utterly magnetic, as though she knows something the world has forgotten. One eye remains unfinished, left blank. Was it an accident or a message? That missing detail is what makes her eternal, not through gold or mummification, but through the unending curiosity of the human imagination. Each year, millions of people stand before her. They admire her face, take photographs, whisper in awe, but few truly know who she was. Not merely a queen, not merely a beauty. So who was Nefertiti? Why did she, a woman once at the center of Egypt's most radical transformation, vanish without a trace? No tomb, no body, no final words. To understand Nefertiti, you cannot start with her. You must begin with the man who unraveled everything, Pharaoh Akhenaten. This is not just the story of a queen. It is the story of a revolution, of a buried symbol, and a mystery unsolved for over 3,000 years. A narrative carved in stone, then deliberately erased, yet never forgotten. Her name alone carried a sense of arrival, of suddenness, of wonder. Nefertiti, in ancient Egyptian, it means the beautiful one has come. A name that sounded less like a title and more like a declaration, as if she had appeared not by lineage or tradition, but by destiny. She came, not from the long line of visible power, but from elsewhere, somewhere veiled in sand and silence. From the moment she enters the historical record, she arrives fully formed, regal, poised, and already beside a revolutionary king. Yet before that, nothing. No temple inscriptions, no royal scrolls, no childhood tales. The history of Nefertiti begins not with a birth, but with an emergence. And that absence is deafening. In a civilization that documented almost every noble lineage with obsessive care, Nefertiti's origins remain conspicuously blank. We only meet her once she is queen, already crowned, already central to Egypt's most radical chapter. Her past is a void, a blank canvas upon which speculation has been etched for centuries. Some believe she was Egyptian nobility by blood. The most prominent theory suggests she was the daughter, perhaps even the niece, of a powerful official named Ai, a man who would eventually become pharaoh himself. If true, that would make her either the half-sister or close kin of Akhenaten, her future husband. A union of royal blood, preserving the divine lineage within Egypt's elite. Others propose something more foreign, more cinematic. That Nefertiti was a foreign princess, gifted from the kingdom of Mitanni or the lands of the Levant, sent in a diplomatic marriage meant to seal peace between empires. An outsider who walked into Egypt and, rather than fade into the court, seized the stage. But regardless of where she came from, native-born or foreign emissary, the impact she made was undeniable. If anything, the ambiguity surrounding her origins has only amplified her legend. She stepped from the shadows not as a mere consort, but as an equal force beside the pharaoh, commanding presence in art, ceremony, and power. We may never uncover her birthplace, but history has already crowned her with something greater than genealogy. Nefertiti became not just queen, but the queen of the Amarna era, a woman whose myth, not her lineage, ensured she would never be forgotten. Nefertiti was never meant to be just the queen who stood behind the throne. From the moment she entered the historical record, she shattered that mold. She wasn't a passive figure of beauty or a silent symbol of support. In the artistic canon of the Amarna period, Nefertiti appears not as a shadow, but as a counterpart, equal in presence, authority, and divinity. She leads religious ceremonies, offers sacrifices to the gods, and even appears in scenes of battle, roles that, until then, were almost exclusively reserved for male pharaohs. Her presence was not ornamental, it was sovereign. Together with Akhenaten, Nefertiti ignited one of the most radical transformations in the religious and political history of ancient Egypt. This was not merely a reform, it was a total upheaval of the spiritual foundation upon which Egypt had stood for centuries. They dismantled the complex and deeply rooted polytheistic system that had governed not just faith, but the entire societal structure. Temples dedicated to the gods of old, Ammonius, Osiris, Isis, were shut down. Their names were chiseled out from monuments. Their priests lost power. It was an act seen by many as heresy. But to Akhenaten and Nefertiti, it was revelation. At the center of this revolution was Aten, the sun disk. Unlike other gods with human forms and personalities, Aten had no face, no myth, no battles. It was pure light, radiant, absolute. Aten became the sole deity worthy of worship. In the artwork of this period, Aten shines down from the heavens in rays ending in small hands, gently touching the faces of the royal family, blessing them directly, bypassing the priests and the people. It was a new spiritual order, and at its heart stood Akhenaten and Nefertiti, not as subjects of worship, but as divine intermediaries. But ideas alone were not enough. They made their break from tradition visible, physical, and permanent. The capital was relocated from Thebes, longtime seat of religious power, to a brand new city carved out of the desert, Akhetaten, the horizon of Aten. The city was designed so that each morning, the sun would rise directly over the cliffs and illuminate the central temple, aligning nature, divinity, and monarchy in one unbroken gesture of power. And there, in the sacred heart of Akhetaten, Nefertiti stood tall, her image etched into stone, not just as consort, but as co-sovereign and spiritual icon. This revolution was not only religious, it was profoundly political. It redefined the pharaoh's relationship with the divine and declared the royal couple as earthly extensions of the heavens. Akhenaten became the embodiment of Aten, and Nefertiti, with her poised gaze and unwavering presence, became the earthly face of belief itself. Their reign declared that power and divinity were one and the same, and that they held both. But with every revolution comes resistance. As they built temples to light, they stirred shadows. And as Nefertiti's star rose alongside Akhenaten's, the forces of the old world, silent for now, began to watch and wait. In the visual world of Amarna, Nefertiti did not stand behind the throne. She stood at its center. Her image appeared everywhere, etched into walls, carved into stone, painted onto altars, sometimes even more frequently than Akhenaten himself. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a declaration. Her presence in art was not just devotional. It was political. Every depiction served as a visual reaffirmation of her power, her proximity to divinity, and her role as co-ruler in the eyes of the people and the priesthood. She wasn't a hidden queen behind a curtain. She was on the front lines, literally and symbolically. In some scenes, Nefertiti offers sacrifices to Aten. With arms lifted in reverence, she stands beneath the radiating disk of the sun, receiving its divine touch just as Akhenaten does. These acts, traditionally reserved for male pharaohs, place her in a role beyond consort. She is the spiritual voice of the new order, the conduit between Aten and the people. In others, she is shown striking down enemies, grasping weapons, driving forward in scenes of victory. Her form is regal and composed, yet undeniably commanding. It's a fusion of femininity and authority rarely seen before or since. She is not merely present. She acts. She drives chariots. She commands. She appears in motion, in battle, in worship. And then she softens. In family scenes, Nefertiti cradles her daughters, kisses their foreheads, touches their cheeks. These moments are quiet but revolutionary. They humanize the royal family, grounding their divine status in gestures of love and tenderness. The queen who defeats enemies is the same one who sings lullabies. The art of Amarna was unlike anything that came before it. Gone were the stiff, idealized forms of the Old Kingdom. In their place came movement, asymmetry, realism, and vulnerability. People are shown mid-step, heads tilted, hands reaching. The royal family is portrayed laughing, playing, praying under the open sky. These are not the distant gods of dynasties past. They are human, intimate, flawed, and relatable. And yet, through it all, Nefertiti remains luminous. She is often placed at the center of the composition, sometimes even higher than Akhenaten, her figure drawn with elegance and precision. Her face is serene but alert, her body poised but never still. She is mother and monarch, priestess and warrior. In this new artistic language, Nefertiti is not just an accessory to power, she is its embodiment. And that embodiment is intentional, meticulous, and revolutionary. Through the lens of Amarna art, Nefertiti became a living deity, both distant and close, divine and deeply human. Her image radiated authority but also emotion, power but also presence. It's this duality, this ability to be both myth and mother, that makes her one of the most enduring icons of ancient Egypt. Her legacy is not just written in stone. It lives in the eyes of every person who has ever looked upon her face and asked, "Who was she?" The art of Amarna gave the world a queen who defied categories, and in doing so, became timeless. ChatGPT to NOI. After the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, Nefertiti vanishes from the official record. No tomb, no funeral inscriptions, no confirmed death, just silence. And that silence, more than any monument or proclamation, has fueled centuries of speculation. If she did not die, then what happened to her? Did she fall from favor, retreat into seclusion, or did she transform, stepping out from beside the throne to take the throne for herself? One theory suggests that Nefertiti did not disappear at all. She changed her name. In the waning years of the Amarna period, a new pharaoh appears in the historical record, Nefertiti, a ruler whose inscriptions use feminine grammatical forms and who is repeatedly referred to as the beloved wife of Akhenaten. The implication is unmistakable. Nefertiti may have taken a new throne name and ruled as pharaoh in her own right, no longer beside Akhenaten but in his place. Another theory revolves around the enigmatic figure of Smenkhare, a pharaoh who ruled briefly after Akhenaten and whose identity remains one of Egyptology's great mysteries. Some believe Smenkhare was a son or male relative of the royal line. Others suggest something more daring, that Smenkhare was Nefertiti herself, adopting a masculine persona in the same way Hatshepsut had done a century earlier. The evidence is thin but compelling. Names scratched onto stone, statues with blurred features, and sudden shifts in regalia and titulary. A third possibility doesn't require disguise at all. In numerous reliefs and artworks from the late Amarna years, Nefertiti is shown alone, offering to Aten, commanding from chariots, issuing royal decrees. She wears the blue crown, a traditional symbol of pharaonic power. Akhenaten is nowhere to be seen. These depictions suggest not just co-rule but solo rule. She was not preparing to lead. She was already leading. To understand the weight of these possibilities, we look to precedent. Hatshepsut had done it before, ruling as a king, wearing the beard, the crown, the titles. But Hatshepsut's legacy, though contested, survived. Nefertiti's, by contrast, was buried, perhaps deliberately. Her revolution, after all, was not just personal. It was religious, political, and total. And when the world turned against Aten, it turned against all who bore his light. These theories challenge the traditional narrative of Nefertiti as a supporting figure. They suggest she was more than a queen. She was a ruler in her own right, a woman who, for a brief moment, may have held the highest power in one of the most powerful civilizations on Earth, and then was erased from its memory. Not because she failed, but because she succeeded in a way the world was not ready to remember. Around the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, something strange happened. Nefertiti, once the radiant heart of the Amarna court, simply vanished. Her name, once carved boldly into temple walls and praised in hymns to the sun, disappeared from inscriptions. Her image, which had been etched into stone with almost obsessive frequency, faded into absence. No gradual decline, no farewell, just silence. Abrupt, unexplainable, and deeply unsettling. For a woman who had stood at the very center of Egypt's most radical political and spiritual revolution, this sudden erasure is more than suspicious. It is haunting. Ancient Egypt was a culture obsessed with continuity, with preserving the names and legacies of its rulers for eternity. And yet, for Nefertiti, one of its most prominent queens, there is no confirmed tomb, no funeral stela, no royal burial inscription, no verified mummy, nothing. This void has led to several competing theories. One of the most widely considered is that Nefertiti died in childbirth, an all too common fate even for queens. Supporting this idea is the fact that her second daughter, Meketaten, also vanishes from the record at roughly the same time. Could a tragic double loss have struck the royal family, prompting her sudden disappearance from public life? So why no royal mourning? No temple offering? No remembrance? Another theory is darker. Nefertiti didn't die. She was removed. Political currents may have shifted within the royal court. The backlash against Akhenaten's monotheistic revolution was growing. The old priesthood, stripped of its gods and its power, simmered in discontent. Perhaps Nefertiti, as the visible face of the Aten faith, became a target. Or perhaps Akhenaten himself turned toward another wife or co-ruler, seeking new alliances as the empire strained under the weight of its own upheaval. In ancient Egyptian culture, to erase a name was no small act. It was a spiritual punishment, a way to destroy someone's soul in the afterlife. And so, the removal of Nefertiti's name from temples and monuments may not have been neglect. It may have been deliberate, a calculated attempt to wipe away her legacy alongside the faith she represented. But if that was the goal, it failed. Because although she vanished from the record, she never vanished from memory. Her disappearance only deepened the mystery. It turned her life into legend, her silence into a question no historian has fully answered. Did she die in childbirth? Was she overthrown? Did she retreat into shadows? Or rise under another name? We may never know, but the very absence of certainty ensures that Nefertiti remains one of the most captivating enigmas of the ancient world. Not forgotten, only hidden, and still calling us to look closer. The story of Nefertiti does not necessarily end with Akhenaten. In fact, for some scholars, it merely changes form, shifting from queen to possible regent, from public icon to silent architect of restoration. And nowhere does this shadow legacy loom larger than in the reign of the boy king, Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun's father is almost certainly Akhenaten, though no direct inscriptions name him. His mother, however, remains a mystery. Some propose Kia, a lesser wife of Akhenaten, but others point quietly, contentiously to Nefertiti. If true, it would make her not only the mother but the guardian of Egypt's most famous pharaoh. Even if she were only his stepmother, Nefertiti's presence during his early life would have been formative. In either case, she would have been a central figure in the upbringing of a future king during one of the most volatile periods in Egyptian history. When Tutankhamun took the throne, he was barely 9 years old, far too young to rule a fractured empire alone. The religious upheaval under Akhenaten had left the priesthood weakened, the public disoriented, and the state in disarray. Someone had to steer the ship, someone with experience, political acumen, and the authority to bridge the world before and after Amarna. The question is, who? Many believe the answer is Nefertiti. Who else had the credibility to negotiate with the powerful priests of Ammonius, to pacify the military elite, to soothe the disillusioned public? Who else knew the architecture of the previous regime inside and out, and could dismantle it without plunging the kingdom into chaos? If she lived beyond Akhenaten, it's possible she became the unseen hand behind the boy king. Hints of this possibility lie scattered in art and relics. In the tomb of Tutankhamun, a painted relief shows a woman anointing the young pharaoh, her features hauntingly similar to Nefertiti's. If it is her, it means she was not just alive but active during the early years of his reign, not as a relic of a failed revolution, but as a guide through its aftermath. Perhaps Nefertiti chose not to rule in name but in influence, partnering with the powerful official who would later claim the throne, or working through loyal advisors from the Amarna court. She may have traded her crown for quiet power, retreating from ceremony but not from control. A queen in the shadows, watching, guiding. If this theory holds, then Nefertiti was more than a symbol of a failed experiment. She was the force that helped salvage what remained. She survived the fall of a revolution she helped build, not through force, but through patience, precision, and political genius. A woman who outlived her era and shaped the one that came next. In 1912, deep within the ruins of Amarna, a discovery was made that would forever change the world's image of ancient Egypt. German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt, excavating the former workshop of the royal sculptor Thutmose, unearthed a bust unlike any other. It was Nefertiti, carved from limestone and delicately painted. The sculpture radiated elegance. A swan-like neck, a perfectly symmetrical face, a serene expression frozen in time, and atop her head, the signature blue crown, tall, smooth, unmistakable. But what truly captured the world's imagination was the detail left incomplete. One eye left blank. Whether by design or accident, it only added to her mystery, beautiful, commanding, but never fully knowable. Today, the bust is housed at the Neues Museum in Berlin, where it draws millions of visitors. Yet its presence there is not without controversy. Egypt has long demanded its return, citing cultural heritage and national identity. Germany, meanwhile, claims legal ownership under the archaeological laws of the early 20th century and argues the bust is too fragile to travel. The debate has become more than a legal dispute. It's a symbol of the broader tensions between colonial-era archaeology and modern calls for cultural restitution. But the power of the bust extends far beyond political borders. It is more than a piece of art. It is a symbol of balance and grace, with features that seem almost modern in their precision. A symbol of female power, with a gaze that commands, not pleads. And most of all, a symbol of unanswered questions. No tomb, no mummy, no definitive ending. Nefertiti's beauty is undeniable, but it is the enigma that gives her immortality. She was never just the wife of a king. She helped shape a religion, co-ruled an empire, and perhaps even ascended the throne in her own name. Her face, immortalized in stone, reflects not only her physical elegance but the multifaceted nature of her influence. A queen, a mother, a priestess, a political strategist. She embodied power in its most complex form, at once divine and human, visible and hidden. And through that singular sculpture, her legacy has defied time. She has become a global icon, not only of ancient beauty, but of female sovereignty, resilience, and mystery. Even in the absence of a tomb, a body, or a final chapter, Nefertiti lives on. In art, in myth, in the restless pursuit of truth. Her story may have been silenced by history, but her image speaks louder than ever. To this day, no tomb bearing the name of Nefertiti has been found. No sarcophagus, no funerary mask, no confirmed mummy. In a civilization obsessed with the afterlife, where the journey beyond death was charted in hieroglyphs and sealed in stone, Nefertiti's absence is more than unusual. It is a riddle, a void where a monument should be, a silence where a eulogy should echo. One of the most compelling theories emerged in 2015, when radar scans of the famed tomb of Tutankhamun, KV-62, revealed anomalies, possible hidden chambers behind the walls. Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves proposed a bold idea, that these secret rooms might be the lost resting place of Nefertiti. If true, it would mean she hadn't vanished, only been hidden, entombed in secrecy, perhaps to shield her legacy, or to keep her close to the boy king who may have been her son or stepson. But despite multiple scans and excavations, no definitive evidence has been brought to light. The hopes of a world waited with bated breath, only to be met with inconclusive data. And yet, the mystery only grew more potent. The fact that her tomb remains unfound has not erased her. It has immortalized her. In a culture where eternal life was achieved through the permanence of a tomb, Nefertiti reversed the order. Her disappearance did not erase her. It exalted her. She became not just a queen of Egypt, but a queen of speculation, a sovereign over the kingdom of imagination. She lives not in stone, but in myth. In Egyptian belief, as long as your name is spoken, your soul endures. And though her body is lost, her name still echoes. Her image still gazes out from museum glass across continents. Her mystery still drives scholars, storytellers, and artists alike. Nefertiti did not need a pyramid to be remembered. Her legacy transcended limestone. She is the proof of an old truth. One does not truly die until they are forgotten. And Nefertiti, in that sense, has never died. She remains, not beneath the sands of Egypt, but in the minds of those still searching for her. Nefertiti may not lie in a gilded tomb. Her name may not be etched on stone sarcophagi or sealed behind towering pyramids, but she lives, vividly, in the collective imagination of the world. No one knows where she died, how she passed, or where her body was laid to rest, if at all. And yet, she persists, not as a relic of dust and bone, but as a force of fascination, a symbol suspended beyond time. Her immortality does not depend on a mummy. It lies in the enigma she left behind. For over 3,000 years, Nefertiti has been resurrected not by priests, but by memory. She is studied in academia, evoked in films and documentaries, sculpted in novels and animated in art. She has passed through the centuries not as a historical footnote, but as a myth in motion, a riddle without resolution, a queen without a grave, and a woman without an end. Her image, the serene, commanding face preserved in limestone, has become one of the most recognizable in all of antiquity. From the bust in Berlin to digital recreations, from paintings to theatrical portrayals, Nefertiti has been reborn in countless forms. Each generation reshapes her. The divine queen, the political reformer, the icon of female power. And yet, in every incarnation, one thing remains: she cannot be fully explained. And that's exactly why she endures. History may have tried to erase her. Her name was scratched out, her monuments dismantled, her lineage questioned, but history failed, because the very act of forgetting only made her more unforgettable. In every unanswered question, she lives. In every empty tomb, she reigns. Nefertiti's true legacy is not the dynasty she left behind, but the mystery that refuses to fade. She does not need a towering monument. She needs only the silence, the space left by her absence to be immortal. She is the great paradox. A queen seen everywhere, yet lost entirely. A ruler once erased, now etched into eternity. And perhaps this is the final truth. Immortality does not require a tomb. It requires curiosity, the relentless, unending act of being searched for. Nefertiti lives not in gold or stone, but in the pursuit itself, in the yearning to know who she was. And what could be more eternal than that? In China, where the clouds are low and the wind whispers through the bamboo groves, something ancient lies curled in the mountains. A dragon, but not the fire-breathing beast of legend, not the winged serpent of old myths. This dragon is made of earth and stone, carved by calloused hands and generations of patience. It does not fly or roar. It lies still, silently stretching across the hillsides, rising and falling with the earth like a sleeping creature. The locals call it the dragon's spine. From a distance, its body seems to ripple across the mountains, each curve shimmering with water, rice, and a quiet pride. The terraced fields that make up its scales glisten in the light, reflecting the sky and tracing the muscles of the earth. But draw closer, and you will find something more alive than legend. This is the Longji Rice Terraces, a living sculpture shaped by human hands over centuries, where each layer is created, not given. This was not a place built overnight. It began more than 700 years ago, when the Zhuang and Yao people encountered steep, impassable slopes. Flat land was scarce. Machinery was non-existent, so they looked up, not down, and they asked a simple question: how can we feed ourselves here? The answer would take a lifetime. With mud baskets on their backs and stone tools in their hands, they chiseled away inch by inch, season by season. What they created was more than farmland. It was a living landscape, shaped by intuition and inherited wisdom. The dragon's body was not summoned. It was summoned into being through sweat and rhythm. With each new step, they taught the mountain to breathe with them. Rain became a resource. Gravity became an ally. Rice, the staple of life, took root where stone had once ruled. And as the steps climbed, they began to form a living thing, strong, sacred, eternal. This was more than agriculture. It was a covenant, a tacit agreement between man and mountain. No land was wasted. No edge was forced. Everything curved, flowed, listened. Today, the dragon still feeds the village. But more than that, it reminds us of what patience can build. In a world rushing forward, here is a dragon that has never been chased, only carved, layer by layer, dream by dream. Walking among the Longji terraces is to enter a story carved in the earth, not written in ink. The hills are not just hills. They breathe stories, whispered through bamboo and carried by the wind. And in that silence, among the mist and the rocks, the dragon still dreams. Over 700 years ago, long before the hum of machines and the spark of engines, in a time untouched by the conveniences of the modern world, a group of people stood before the mountains of Guangxi and made a choice. The land was steep, unforgiving. Flat soil for farming was rare, and the climate could be cruel. But instead of turning away, the Zhuang and the Yao, two ancient ethnic groups with deep roots in the mountains, chose to stay. They did not see the terrain as a wall to retreat from, but as a partner to understand, to shape, and to eventually live with. In that choice began the quiet birth of one of humanity's most enduring masterpieces. These weren't warriors or kings. They were farmers, families, people whose lives were wrapped in the rhythms of the earth. They had no machines, no metal tools, no blueprints or engineers. What they did have was time, and patience, and a different kind of genius. The ability to observe the land, listen to water, and shape the mountain not with force, but with rhythm. They asked themselves a question. How do we sow? The answer would come. With nothing more than woven baskets, wooden shovels, stone picks, and their own hands, they began to etch the slopes. Inch by inch, layer by layer. Every season, another row. Every year, another step. There was no rush, no shortcuts, just determination passed from hand to hand, season to season. What began as survival soon became a kind of devotion. These terraces weren't just fields. They were a living dialogue between people and land, carried on in silence, in sweat, in instinct. There were no maps, no measurements, no right angles or rulers. The mountain dictated the rules, and the people responded not with calculations but with intuition. Children learned by standing in the water, feeling the pull of the mud. Elders read the mountain like a memory, noting the slope of a hill, the sound of water pooling, the strength of the rain. A wrong incline would cause flooding. Too flat and water would stagnate. So they adjusted with care, measuring not in centimeters, but in seasons and senses. Each terrace was both engineering and inheritance, a gift left by those who came before and a foundation for those who would follow. These were not fields made in years or even decades, they were made in centuries. A father would build what his son would finish. A grandmother would plant what her granddaughter would someday harvest. In this way, the terraces became not just a source of food, but a legacy sculpted in earth, an act of defiance against the impossible, carved slowly, lovingly, into the bones of the mountain. So no, the Longji terraces were not made by machines. They were made by hands, by backs bent under sun and rain, by people who believed that even the harshest ground could be taught to feed life, if one was patient enough to listen. And so, with each generation, the dragon's body began to take shape, not with fire, but with faith, not with speed, but with time. At the heart of the Longji terraces, beneath every curve and ripple of the land, flows something more than water. It is the quiet pulse that gives life to the dragon. Not a mechanical system, not pipes or pumps, but a sacred choreography of earth and gravity, of patience and instinct. The water is its blood, and like any living being, its circulation must be tended, honored, and understood. The source is simple: rainfall, spring water, the generosity of the mountaintops. There are no engines humming in the background, no man-made reservoirs, just the sky and the stones. Water gathers from natural springs near the peaks, collects in narrow channels and earthen canals, and begins its journey downward, an ancient rhythm, orchestrated not by machines, but by slope and time. Gravity is the silent partner in this system. It is not fought but welcomed. The terraces are designed to work with the mountain, not against it. Each level is slightly lower than the last, allowing water to trickle naturally from one field to the next. This cascade is neither hurried nor chaotic. It is measured, balanced, almost musical. Water arrives where it is needed, no more, no less, then continues its descent. It is a dance not of chaos, but of control. This hydraulic ballet is not accidental. It's the result of generations tuning every bend, every gate, every channel with precision. Each terrace is both a recipient and a donor, accepting water, using what it needs, then passing the rest. No level floods, no level dries out. The entire system breathes together, a long exhale down the mountain's spine. And yet, there are no metal valves, no gauges, no monitors. Control lies in the hands of the farmers, literally. Water is guided by simple gates made of stone or wood, hand-carved and maintained by villagers themselves. These gates are opened or closed manually, based not on timers or instructions, but on familiarity. Knowledge passed down through observation, habit, and intuition. It's a form of communication not just with each other, but with the land. Every day, farmers walk the ridges. They don't just look, they listen, they feel. A strange gurgle might mean a leak. A silence where there should be flow could signal a blockage. To them, water speaks and they know its language. Tending the system is not unlike tuning an instrument. Each sound has a pitch, a tone, a warning. To mishear is to misstep. But to listen closely is to keep the dragon alive. Water here is more than resource. It is spirit. It is trust. To care for it is both technical and sacred. The farmers are not just cultivators. They are guardians of the dragon's lifeblood. With each drop that moves, they maintain a covenant. A promise that as long as the water flows, the land will live. Not through dominance, but through respect. Not by force, but through harmony. Because here, among the stones and silence, water doesn't just nourish rice. It nourishes memory, rhythm, and the quiet beating heart of something greater than themselves. ChatGPT to NOI. Spring begins not with blossoms, but with reflection. As the snow melts from the mountain peaks and the first waters are guided into the fields, The terraces of Longji shimmer like mirrors newly polished. The still surface of each rice paddy captures the sky above. Clouds drifting, pale sunlight softening the blue, the outlines of bamboo swaying gently in the breeze. It's as if heaven and earth have folded into each other. Walking among these flooded fields feels like stepping into the sky, as if each step is taken not on ground, but on light. This is the first breath of the dragon, awakening after a long winter slumber, quiet, clear, and full of promise. Then comes summer. The terraces, once silver, now surge with green. Rice stalks rise boldly from the water, covering every step of the mountainside with a blanket of emerald life. From a distance, the hills look like flowing waterfalls made of jade. In the fields, farmers wade knee-deep through water, their wide straw hats bobbing like sails on a green sea. Frogs croak, dragonflies dart, wind moves through leaves, and water trickles in steady rhythm. The whole landscape pulses. It's not just growing, it's alive. The dragon is not only awake now, it is moving. This is its heartbeat, strong and steady, thumping through every blade of rice. In autumn, the dragon shines. The rice ripens and turns gold, and the terraces catch the sun like sequins draped over the mountain. The fields resemble bands of liquid gold, tier upon tier, glowing under clear skies. It is the season of gathering, of celebration. Villagers sing, drums echo, families return to feast, to harvest, to honor the land that fed them. Glutinous rice is steamed, stories are shared, and traditional dances are performed in courtyards strung with lanterns. This is the dragon's most generous breath, the exhale of reward, offering its treasure back to those who have waited. Then comes winter. The fields go quiet. Water drains or freezes. Sometimes, snow falls, covering the terraces in a soft white quilt. Other times, frost clings to the stones like delicate lace. No farmers walk the ridges. No tools scrape the earth. Only the whisper of wind passes through the bamboo. The dragon rests again, its back still visible, its breath now shallow, waiting. This is not an ending. It is a sacred pause, a needed silence before the next awakening. The terraces do not simply reflect weather, they reflect rhythm. A rhythm older than memory. Every season is a verse in an unending poem, written not with ink, but with light, color, and time. The dragon does not roar. It breathes, through rice and rain, snow and silence. And as long as the seasons turn, it will never stop. Along the dragon's spine lie ancient villages, Pingon, Dai, Jinzhen. Where time does not pass, it stands still. These are more than settlements. They are living museums. Every house, balcony, and passageway hold stories passed from hand to hand, from foot to foot. The villages do not stand on steps. They flow with them. The houses are nestled in the mountains, their wooden skeletons hugging the curves of the land like memories that never fade. Seen from above, they appear as wooden lanterns floating gently on waves of green rice. The architecture is not random. It is the result of understanding the mountain. The houses are built on stilts, raised above the wet ground, not just to protect against flooding, but to breathe with the slope. Rain slides down from the dark, slanted roofs, reflecting the very terraces they overlook. The union of house and earth is not decoration. It is survival made beautiful. Here, function and form intertwine, rooted in generations of adaptation. Inside these wooden houses, life is communal. Families span generations under one roof. Grandparents care for children. Parents work in the fields. Children learn by watching hands, not reading books. A meal is more than just food. It is a moment when the past merges with the present and makes room for the future. Individualism is rare. Instead, there is a bond, a quiet dependence, as if the entire village breathes with one set of lungs. Cultural traditions are woven into everything. Red Dao women, with their hair never cut, curl their long black locks into elegant crowns. Occasionally, they let their hair fall like soft waterfalls as they bathe in the river, a sight so graceful it belongs to legend. Their hands work the looms, threading indigo-dyed cloth with symbols of water, rice, and dragon tails. Each pattern is not decorative. It tells a story. Music echoes through the hills, carried by bamboo flutes and bronze drums. During festivals, villagers dance, chant, and offer food to the mountain and water gods. Rituals are not just for ritual, they flow into everyday life. There is no separation between spirit and reality. Firewood crackles in a traditional fireplace. Tea is brewed with leaves collected from the surrounding hills. Before vegetables are picked, a silent prayer is whispered. Before water is poured into the fields, a hand is raised to the sky. These actions are not performances. They are instincts. Traditions are not remembered here. They are lived. Longji culture is not trapped behind museum glass. It moves with the wind, sings to the drums, is in the folds of her hair. It's a way of being, not a history. Here, people don't walk on the land, they walk with the land. And in that walking, they become part of the dragon's breath. In Longji, the terraces are sacred scriptures written on earth and water. To the villagers, they are more than mere agricultural feats. They are alive, they breathe, they dream, and in that dream lies an ancient truth passed down from whisper to whisper, never written down, but never forgotten. These terraces. The legend is not told as myth, but accepted as memory. The people say that the dragon came to rest on the mountains, arching its massive body over the ridges. Its back arched, its scales glistened, and the earth responded. The terraces formed where its body lay, each curve a ripple of its breath, each line a glistening scale. And as the mist fell from the valleys, moving slowly over the hills like a silken blanket, the villagers smiled softly and said, "The earth shook, the air thickened," but the terraced fields were not just formed by legend. During times of famine, the elders recounted, ancestors climbed the mountains to cry for help. Their hands were empty, their hearts were full. They raised their voices to the sky, and the gods, moved by their devotion, sent rain, and with it a vision, a revelation of how to carve out the mountains layer by layer so that the rice could take root. It was not a command, it was a gift. From then on, farming was no longer seen as survival but obedience. These beliefs are not written in any book, but they live in every action. They are hidden in the songs sung while planting. They linger in the silence that covers the misty morning's blind. No tree is cut without a prayer. No water is poured into the field without a silent offering. Maybe a little rice wine, maybe a whisper. Silence is respected. Stillness is respected. Because when the dragon sleeps, you sleep too. The sacred is not separate from the earth. Children do not learn it in temples, they learn by example. They watch their grandmother burn incense before planting the first tree. They see their father bow to the stream before redirecting its flow. They understand, without explanation, that faith is not ritual. It is continuity. It is reverence wrapped in repetition. It is the invisible woven into the visible. For the people of Longji, a stalk of rice is not just food but a prayer planted high. A terraced field is not just a field but a hymn carved into the ground. What they do here is not agriculture in the conventional sense. It is a covenant, a living agreement between man, land, spirit, and sky. A covenant that requires no contracts, only care. No doctrine, only devotion. In Longji, farming is trust. Trust is remembering. And remembering is walking with the dragon, season after season, breath after breath. Modernization found its way up the mountain. Not suddenly, but gradually, like mist creeping through bamboo. It came with footsteps not of farmers, but of tourists. With hands not caked in mud, but holding cameras, smartphones, and selfie sticks. What was once a hidden rhythm known only to those who called Longji home is now a destination, typed into search bars, pinned on digital maps. The narrow trails once marked by woven sandals now echo with the sound of hiking boots and spoken languages from half a world away. Technology followed. Signal towers rose. Signs in Mandarin and English appeared beside sacred springs. Drones buzzed in skies once ruled only by birds. And along with this flow of visitors came questions the mountain had never had to answer before. Would this place, This living dragon carved in stone, be preserved or performed? Would its story be told in truth or flattened into postcards? Would the old wooden houses give way to concrete convenience? Would tradition be painted on like decoration? First there was worry. A quiet fear whispered among the villagers that what made Longji real would be turned into a spectacle, that what took centuries to shape could be diluted in a few years of tourism. But the people did not respond with anger or retreat. Instead, they chose something rare. They adapted gently, wisely, without losing themselves. Homestays began to open, not resorts, not hotels, but homes. Real homes, where guests sleep under timber beams, wake to the sound of chickens, and eat sticky rice steamed in bamboo cut that morning. The rooms aren't polished by uniform service. They're worn with real life. And that's the point. Visitors are not here to observe from a distance. They are here to step inside a slower rhythm. And even as the village welcomes guests, the fields remain untouched by machines. Rice is still planted by hand. Water is still released with care. Prayers are still whispered before the first gate opens. The songs of the harvest are still sung by those whose hands know the soil, not the script. Tourism has not replaced agriculture, it walks beside it. The money helps repair old homes. It helps bring sons and daughters back from cities. Some come home to work the fields again. Others return to teach visitors, to pass on the story with pride instead of nostalgia. The dragon, they know, must move, but it does not have to forget how to breathe. Longji did not freeze in time. It did not shut its gates or sell its soul. It chose something harder, to absorb the change without losing its shape, to welcome the world without abandoning its heartbeat. And so the terraces remain, not as relics, but as proof that when people live in tune with their land, progress doesn't erase the past. It deepens its roots. The terraces of Longji are not just a feat of agriculture. They are a living covenant, a silent pact between human hands and the bones of the earth. Not written in ink, not signed in haste, but etched layer by layer with sweat, with mud, with time. They are a contract forged through generations, not with legal clauses, but with sunrises, with monsoon rains, and with the patience to return season after season, never asking for reward, only the chance to begin again. It is not just land that is cultivated here. It is trust. These fields are not born from conquest. The people of Longji did not tame the mountain by force. They did not blast it or bend it. They listened. They followed its curves, its silences, its shifting moods. They adjusted gently. They shaped without cutting. They carved without scarring. It is a philosophy that runs deeper than farming, a way of life that says, do not overpower nature. Align with it. Let it guide you. Bend like the bamboo. Flow like the stream. Breathe like the mountain. And that's where the beauty lies, not in drama or spectacle, but in the persistence of quiet things. In the way water glides across a terrace with no fanfare. In the way hands move rhythmically through rice fields, planting, pressing, rising, repeating. In the stillness of dawn before the tools begin their work. The terraces don't demand attention. They earn reverence slowly. They do not shout, they endure. That endurance becomes their radiance. To plant a seed here is not just to grow food. It is to make a promise. Promise to your family. A promise to those who came before. A promise to the land itself that you will continue the rhythm. That you will not rush it, not replace it, not forget it. A bowl of rice on a family table is more than sustenance. It is memory made edible. To guide the water down a channel is to remember how your grandfather's hands did the same. To walk the ridges in silence is to hear the footsteps of your grandmother, steady and barefoot. Every action, no matter how small, carries a weight far beyond the moment. Every hat lua, every scoop of earth, every tightened rope on a terrace wall is part of something vast, something slow, something sacred. It is the breath of the dragon, not loud, not fiery, but deep and steady, pulsing quietly through time. And in that breath is a lesson, that in a world obsessed with speed and disruption, with loud innovation and instant change, there are still places that choose the long way, that choose depth over noise, that believe in building things not to be seen quickly, but to be felt forever. Longji is not frozen in the past. It is not a museum. It is a rhythm still beating, a harmony still unfolding. It tells us that not all progress looks like movement. Sometimes progress looks like staying, like repeating, like remembering. The terraces do not resist time, they flow with it. They are not monuments. They are reminders that true greatness does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes as a single drop of water, falling exactly where it needs to, again, and again, and again. On the Giza Plateau, where the sun scorches the desert and the shadows of pyramids stretch long across the sand, every gaze is drawn upward. Tourists arrive from all over the world to look up at greatness. The towering pyramids, monuments to human will and mystery, and the great Sphinx, half lion, half man, guarding the necropolis with silent authority, forever facing the rising sun. Giza is a place of grandeur exposed, of marvels reaching toward the sky. But few ever ask the question, what lies beneath? Beneath the burning sand, beneath the Nile, whose waters have shifted course like the breathing of the ages. Beneath the ancient layers of mud and silt that time itself seems to have forgotten. There, only a short distance from Giza, lies the quiet village of Abu Rash, a place with no temples, no monuments, but with a legend whispered across generations. The villagers speak of a massive shape, half buried in the water. A back, curved, symmetrical, unmistakably feline in form. Too precise to be natural, too deliberate to be coincidence. When the river withdraws during the dry season, strange curved stones and faint carved lines appear, only briefly, before disappearing once more into the silence. There are no signs, no walking trails, no velvet ropes or tourist buses idling nearby. Only reeds, stagnant water, and a quiet that seems to hum with something ancient. The place does not announce itself. It waits, as if it's guarding a secret, not by hiding it, but by letting it remain unspoken. And then, inevitably, the question rises. What is buried beneath Egypt's holy ground? What story has not yet been unearthed? If there is a second Sphinx, one submerged, forgotten, and perhaps even older, then everything we think we know about ancient Egypt may be incomplete. Maybe Giza is not the beginning of the story. Maybe it is the echo, a monument built atop a memory that still breathes beneath the mud. While the world's eyes remain fixed on the towering marvels above the sand, a quiet ripple has stirred beneath the surface, among reeds, beneath brackish water, and within the minds of those unwilling to accept that history has already been fully written. In the shadow of Giza, near the village of Abu Rash, a series of strange findings has emerged. Not from myths alone, but from instruments, sensors, and curious eyes brave enough to ask, what lies beneath? Modern explorers, operating far from tourist paths, have employed advanced tools in their search. Sonar scanners pierce the murky waters, and ground-penetrating radar, GPR, probes the sediment. High-resolution satellite imagery is layered atop, revealing not chaos, but clarity. What they've uncovered is deeply unsettling to conventional timelines. Geometric blocks with startling symmetry, lines too straight, contours too intentional. The radar returns don't resemble scattered boulders. They hint at structure, order, design. Some alignments even suggest astronomical orientation, as if whatever lies beneath was placed with purpose, with celestial awareness, not by accident but by ancient calculation. Yet this mystery didn't begin in laboratories or academic institutions. It began quietly in the 1980s when independent researchers, divers, amateurs, and uncredentialed Egypt enthusiasts began whispering about something strange near Abu Rash. They described what appeared to be the base of paws, lion-like, emerging from muck. Others mentioned a worn but discernible face, too weathered to be clear, yet too human-like to be ignored. There were carved lines that seemed far too smooth, far too deliberate to be the work of erosion alone. Their reports were filled with conviction, photographs blurred by sediment and time, but the response they received was near universal. Silence, ridicule, dismissal. Wishful thinking, they were told. Geological coincidence. Still, the place itself refuses to fade. It's not part of any official archaeological register. No plaques mark its presence. The area is an ecological dead zone, thick with reeds and stagnant water. Tour buses never pass through. No footpaths lead in. It's the exact opposite of Giza, where one is flooded with spotlights. This site remains hidden in shadow. Only those willing to brave mosquito-choked wetlands and uneasy ground arrive. And when they do, many report the same sensation. This land feels alive. Not with life, but with memory. As if it's watching, waiting, refusing to be forgotten. From these fragments, lines in mud, sonar scans, blurred photographs, a theory begins to take form. What if this is not erosion? Not coincidence? What if what lies buried here is intentional? A monument submerged, not destroyed, but hidden. The geometry is too clean. The symmetry too precise. These are not things water does by accident. Slowly, the question shifts from what is this to why has it been ignored? And in that silence, the possibility grows louder. Perhaps what lies beneath is not only ancient, but inconvenient. Perhaps it challenges the foundation upon which all other timelines have been built. For centuries, the academic world has anchored the age of Egypt's Great Sphinx at around 2500 BCE, crediting its construction to Pharaoh Khafre of the 4th dynasty. It's a comfortable placement, tidy, logical, and supported by surrounding tombs and inscriptions. But what if that timeline is not the beginning? What if the Sphinx that draws millions of eyes each year isn't the first of its kind, but a replica? An echo of something older, deeper, and now submerged beneath time, silt, and silence. The so-called underwater Sphinx, hidden near Abu Rash, may predate not just the pyramids, but the very formation of Egypt as a nation. If the features observed, symmetry, geometry, erosion patterns, are indeed artificial, then its origins must be traced back to a time when Egypt had no pharaohs, no tombs, and no hieroglyphs. It suggests construction in a pre-dynastic era, long before the first official kings carved their names into stone. We would be looking not at a monument of empire, but at a relic of a forgotten world. To understand its possible age, we must look to the ancient environment in which it might have been built. Between roughly 10,000 and 5,000 BCE, North Africa experienced what scientists now call the African Humid Period, the time of the Green Sahara. Back then, the vast desert we know today was a fertile savanna. Lakes dotted the landscape. Rainfall was abundant. Herds of animals roamed freely. And the Nile River, far from the narrow, docile ribbon we see today, was wild, braided into branches, prone to massive flooding, and entirely unstable. It was a world more alive, more fertile, more unpredictable. This period provided the perfect conditions for a prehistoric people to leave their mark in stone, only to have that mark buried beneath millennia of shifting terrain and seasonal floods. If the submerged structure near Abu Rash does indeed date to this time, it would belong to a lost chapter in human history, a chapter written not in ink but in erosion. That erosion may be the key. Geologist Dr. Robert Schoch, among others, has long argued that the vertical fissures around the Great Sphinx of Giza are not the work of wind and sand, but of heavy, sustained rainfall. Rain Egypt hasn't seen since before 7000 BCE. The implication is staggering. If true, then the Giza Sphinx itself must be thousands of years older than traditionally believed. Now, apply that same logic to the underwater formation. The grooves seen in sonar and photographic surveys are rounded, vertical, and smoothed in ways inconsistent with modern Nile flooding. They resemble the same long-forgotten water signatures that Schoch pointed to, cut not by desert winds, but by a world where the skies opened often, and with force. The comparisons don't stop there. Consider Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, dated to 9600 BCE, a megalithic temple complex built by a pre-agricultural society, with carved stone pillars and celestial alignments. If such a site could exist so early, why not in Egypt? The underwater Sphinx may represent another node in a global pattern, a civilization or civilizations that thrived before history's curtain officially rose, a people who built in stone before they wrote in symbols, who aligned monuments to stars before they built cities. If this theory is correct, the implications are seismic. It would shake the very bedrock of what we think we know about Egypt and about civilization itself. Pharaohs would no longer stand as the first stone builders. Instead, they might be inheritors of an earlier tradition, one whose knowledge was passed down not through scrolls, but through whispers in the earth. The underwater sphinx would not just be a relic, it would be a key, a door, a challenge to the boundaries of time, asking not just when we began, but what we forgot. Despite growing whispers and mounting curiosity, the so-called underwater sphinx near Abu Rash remains untouched. Not a single shovel has officially broken ground. No excavation sanctioned by the Egyptian government has ever been attempted at the site. The structure, if it exists, lives in the murky realm of unofficial reports, speculative sonar scans, and the testimonies of independent researchers. It has been circled, measured, theorized, but never formally acknowledged. And that silence in itself speaks volumes. Everything we know about the alleged structure comes not from state-sponsored institutions, but from the margins: divers, amateur geologists, rogue scholars, and unaffiliated researchers. Their work exists in academic exile, pushed to the fringes of legitimacy. Without approval, funding, or peer-reviewed support, their findings remain anecdotal, no matter how compelling. The mainstream academic world, for the most part, has chosen to look the other way. And the reasons are many. Egypt is one of the most tightly regulated archaeological environments in the world. To excavate any site, especially one that lies near sacred monuments and historical landmarks, requires layers of legal and bureaucratic approval. Permits must be obtained from the Supreme Council of Antiquities. Detailed excavation plans must be submitted, proving that the project will neither damage the site nor disrupt Egypt's carefully curated historical narrative. In many cases, international oversight is required. Committees of scholars must weigh in. Cultural and historical review boards must assess the impact. Then there is the matter of logistics. This is not a desert dig. It is an operation in marshland, under seasonal floodwaters. To even begin, an excavation would require high-capacity water extraction systems, underwater archaeological technology, and ecological protections for the surrounding area. The cost? Immense. The timeline? Likely measured in decades. And without definitive proof beforehand, without a guarantee that something extraordinary lies beneath, the risk becomes too great for many institutions. Most aren't willing to gamble millions on what might turn out to be weathered limestone. But perhaps the greatest barrier isn't political or logistical. It's academic. To dig up a structure that might be older than the Great Sphinx of Giza is to threaten the foundation of modern Egyptology. The mainstream timeline tells us that Egyptian civilization began around 3000 BCE, with the rise of the First Dynasty. The Great Sphinx, carved during the reign of Khafre around 2500 BCE, fits neatly into that framework. But a monument older than that, one not attributed to pharaohs, one without hieroglyphs, would demand a rewriting of textbooks, a reassessment of what defines a civilization, and a rethinking of the role Egypt played in the ancient world. Some argue that this resistance isn't just about evidence, it's about control. A discovery of that magnitude could disrupt tourism, national pride, and institutional prestige. Egypt's history is not just history. It's a global brand, and brands require consistency. A timeline-shattering find beneath the Nile mud could create more questions than answers. Questions the authorities may not be ready or willing to face. So the silence continues. Strategic, careful, and perhaps intentional. What can't be disproven is simply ignored. What might change everything is left buried. For now, not because it is unimportant, but because it may be too important. ChatGPT to NOI. Situated on the northern edge of the Giza Plateau, the region of Abu Rash is not a name that echoes through tour guides or museum brochures. It is a place passed over, forgotten by maps and modern movement. And yet, beneath its silence, it may hold the most important unanswered question in Egyptology. This area sits within a low-lying flood basin, an ancient geological bowl carved by the Nile's seasonal swells over thousands of years. Water floods it, retreats, and leaves behind thick layers of silt and clay, undisturbed and untouched. It is not land suited for farming, nor has it been transformed for modern development. That perhaps is exactly why it has managed to hide what lies beneath. Within this seemingly insignificant terrain, modern instruments have begun to detect what the naked eye cannot. Ground-penetrating radar and high-resolution satellite imagery have revealed something deeply unexpected. Patterns. Clear, angular formations buried beneath the surface, shapes too symmetrical, too organized to be dismissed as chance. Some resemble rectangular outlines. Others seem aligned to the cardinal directions. These are not natural scatterings of stone. They resemble foundations, structures, something designed. The geology of the region only deepens the mystery. Beneath Abu Rash lies a thick, ancient layer of clay, a material that traps moisture, resists erosion, and preserves anything buried within it for extraordinary lengths of time. Compounding this is the fluctuating groundwater table, a seasonal rhythm that creates an almost cryogenic effect. While sun-exposed monuments are weathered by sand and wind, this place acts like a sealed archive. Still, quiet, preserved. And then there are the erosion marks. Researchers have pointed out features that do not match patterns caused by modern river flow or desert winds. Deep vertical grooves, rounded surfaces, segmented curves, these do not form randomly. They echo the telltale signs of human hands, of ancient carving worn by time. Sediment samples in the area date back to the early Holocene, a time when Egypt was not yet a desert, when the Sahara was green, and the Nile ran wild and free, overflowing with memory and mystery. If these shapes are artificial, if these formations are not tricks of geology but remnants of architecture, then Abu Rash is more than an overlooked marsh. It could be the missing page between Egypt's pre-dynastic past and a sacred era that has no written name. This place, long silenced by mud and obscured by reeds, might not be empty at all. It might be the very place where history waits to be remembered. And in that waiting, it offers a challenge, not to discover something new, but to recognize what has always been there. Few topics in modern archaeology ignite debate quite like the question circling the so-called underwater sphinx. Is it a natural formation, or something far more deliberate, something man-made? The battle lines are drawn between two worlds. On one side, traditional Egyptologists and geologists. On the other, independent researchers, unaffiliated scientists, and seekers of lost knowledge. The argument is not just about rock and erosion, it is about worldview, authority, and the right to question what we think we know. The mainstream academic position is clear. According to conventional geologists and Egyptologists, the structure near Abu Rash is almost certainly a natural formation. A weathered outcrop of limestone, shaped over thousands of years by the rise and fall of floodwaters, buried in silt, subjected to seasonal erosion. They point out that there are no hieroglyphs, no tools, no carved symbols, no fragments of infrastructure, none of the standard markers that traditionally accompany a confirmed archaeological site. Without these, they argue, there is no reason to believe that the shape is anything more than an illusion created by nature. From a geological standpoint, symmetry is not rare. Wind, water, and gravity can, under the right conditions, carve surprising forms. Perfect curves, balanced contours, even formations that mimic faces, limbs, or architecture. Traditionalists often invoke the face on Mars as a cautionary tale, a naturally occurring rock formation that, in low-resolution photos, resembled a human face. Higher quality imaging later proved it was just shadows on stone. To them, the underwater sphinx is just another pareidolia, the human brain projecting meaning onto chaos. But the opposing camp isn't convinced. Independent researchers argue that technology tells a different story. Satellite imagery, sonar scans, and ground-penetrating radar reveal too much precision to dismiss. Bilateral symmetry across the shoulders, foundation-like rectangles, smooth curves that follow geometric logic. They insist that these elements aren't random, but reflect design, conscious, intelligent design. More importantly, they question why the mainstream seems so reluctant to investigate. They raise the uncomfortable possibility that institutions may be suppressing inquiry, not for lack of data, but for fear of disruption. If the underwater sphinx were proven to be man-made and older than the Great Pyramid, it would shatter established timelines, challenge the origins of Egyptian civilization, and threaten the prestige of entire academic structures. For a nation whose identity and economy are closely tied to its archaeological narrative, such a revelation could be destabilizing. Some go further, suggesting that this avoidance is not just bureaucratic caution but a strategic silence. They call for transparency, for a public excavation supervised by independent bodies. They argue that unorthodox ideas are not inherently wrong, and that science should follow evidence, not consensus. What emerges is not just a debate about stone, but a deeper tension between preservation and exploration, between institutional caution and intellectual curiosity. One side demands irrefutable proof before rewriting history. The other believes some histories cannot be revealed without first daring to question the narrative. And so the underwater Sphinx remains where it always has, buried, between the two poles of conviction, between caution and courage, between what we accept and what we might be forced to reconsider if we dared to dig. In ancient Egypt, few symbols carry as much layered meaning as the Sphinx, an icon that merges the raw power of the animal kingdom with the calculated will of the human mind. With the body of a lion and the head of a man, the Sphinx is not merely a sculpture. It is a theological statement in stone. The lion's form represents dominance, physical strength, the wild force of nature itself. The human face, often modeled after royalty, reflects reason, command, and divine rulership. Together, they portray the ideal, a king who does not conquer through brute strength alone, but by wisdom and sacred authority. The Sphinx stands as a boundary figure, guarding the space where the earthly meets the eternal, where men speak to gods. Nowhere is this symbolism more powerfully embodied than in the Great Sphinx of Giza. Carved directly from a single massive limestone outcrop, it stretches 73 meters in length and rises 20 meters high. Its gaze is fixed eternally to the east, watching for the sunrise, the daily rebirth of the sun god. Positioned as sentinel to the funerary complex, particularly that of Pharaoh Khafre, according to mainstream theory, it serves not only as a protector of tombs but as a beacon of the divine cycle of life, death, and renewal. Associated with sun deities like Ra and Horus, the Giza Sphinx affirms its creator's divine legitimacy and cosmic alignment. But if another Sphinx lies buried beneath the mud near Abu Rash, the narrative shifts dramatically. What if this submerged figure predates the dynastic period entirely? What if it is not a replica but the prototype, the original embodiment of an idea later canonized at Giza? Such a possibility raises profound questions. It implies that the concept of the Sphinx did not originate with Khafre, but with a forgotten culture that revered this hybrid form for ritual or astronomical purposes. It opens the door to an entire symbolic system that predates the written word. Egyptian architecture is rich with pairs and symmetry. Twin obelisks, double statues, and lion-lined avenues. What if the twin guardians we never knew existed were the Great Sphinx and its underwater counterpart, lost in time, but once standing in sacred dialogue across the desert and the Nile? If true, the submerged Sphinx is not just an archaeological curiosity, it is the missing half of a cosmic pair. A silent echo of a civilization that once understood the power of stone not only as structure, but as language. A language we are only beginning to hear again. The underwater Sphinx, whether carved by hands or shaped by time, is no longer just a submerged form in muddy water. It has become something more, a mirror held up to our collective memory. Even without official excavation, it has stirred a deep and unsettling curiosity. It has transformed into a living metaphor for the forgotten, the obscured, the silenced parts of our story. It is not merely about stone. It is about the weight of what we no longer see. In many ways, the Sphinx beneath the Nile has come to resemble the deep memory of humankind. Still there, but buried beneath layers of silt and centuries. It does not speak, but it persists. It does not move, but it waits. In its silence, it whispers. Through eroded lines and hidden geometry, it tells a story we are just beginning to remember. A story not written in textbooks, but felt in intuition, in wonder, in the ache of absence. This sense of hidden truth touches a wound older than empires, the truth that everything we build, we may also lose. Civilizations collapse. Languages die. Even dreams carved into granite can be washed away by sand, water, and time. We like to believe we live above the ruins, but more often we live within them, blind to their presence. How much have we forgotten in our pursuit of progress? How many mysteries lie just beneath our feet, unnoticed because we've stopped looking down? The underwater Sphinx challenges more than Egyptology. It asks a question of all of us. History is not linear. It is not a clean timeline, but a fragmented scroll, torn, rewritten, missing pages. Some chapters have been erased. Others never made it to ink. And this monument, real or imagined, forces a reckoning. Do we only believe in what has been proven? Or are we allowed to believe in what is still hidden, still unconfirmed, but undeniably resonant? More than archaeology, this becomes a matter of perception, a reflection of our own limits, a test of our humility. The Sphinx under the water may be telling us that the earliest parts of our human story are not lost, but only buried, and that perhaps we've been walking across them all along. It reminds us that history is not closed. It is still unfolding, not just in mud and stone, but in myth, in memory, and in the silent places within ourselves that still believe something sacred may be waiting to be found. The underwater Sphinx may never be unearthed. That is the bitter truth. Between cautious academia and tightly guarded national narratives, the chances of an official excavation grow slimmer with each passing year. Bureaucratic hurdles stack high. Permits, politics, preservation. And underneath it all lies a quieter resistance. The fear that what rests beneath the mud may not align with what we've been taught to believe. Not because it's false, but because it's inconvenient. But perhaps its power lies not in revelation, but in provocation. The underwater Sphinx is more than a mystery. It is a test, a challenge to our imagination, to the boundaries we place around curiosity. It dares to ask, what qualifies as truth? When do questions deserve attention, even if the answers are buried? Between fact and forgotten lies a fragile line, and this monument, silent and sunken, stands on it. It reflects something deeply human, a discomfort with the unknown, and a longing to make peace with it. Maybe that's why it unsettles us. Maybe it is not the mud or the stone we fear, but the mirror it holds up, showing us how much we've forgotten, how much we choose not to see. Still, the Sphinx whispers, not loudly, not to all, but to those willing to listen. Not with proof, but with presence. There are no lights, no signs, no final verdicts, and yet it endures, waiting, watching, not to confirm or to deny, but to invite us to wonder, to reach further, to dig, not just into the ground, but into ourselves. Because in the end, it may not matter if the Sphinx is real. What matters is that it made us look again. And in an age drowning in answers, that spark of sacred curiosity might just be the most important thing we have left. Long before the towering pyramids of Giza, before the bustling cities of Mesopotamia, before Stonehenge pierced the sky, there was Carol. Hidden deep in the barren valleys of Peru's coast, Carol rose in silent majesty nearly 5,000 years ago, only to vanish entirely into oblivion. Swallowed by sand, forgotten by time. For centuries, the world had no idea it had ever existed. The Soup Valley, where Carol once flourished, seemed at first glance an unlikely birthplace of civilization. A harsh, cracked landscape, a sun that burns the earth dry, a river that snakes through stone like a silver thread on the verge of vanishing. To most, it looked lifeless, a place abandoned by the gods. But here, in this desolation, one of humanity's first great cities was born. Carol was not a scattering of huts, not a temporary trading post. It was a planned city spanning over 150 acres, with pyramids, sunken plazas, residential sectors, and ceremonial spaces. It had scale, purpose, and vision. This society blossomed centuries before the Egyptians built their pyramids. The people of Carol achieved it without wheels, without writing, without metal tools. They raised monumental architecture from stone and earth, using only collective labor, ingenuity, and the raw force of human will. And yet, for millennia, Carol remained a secret. Even travelers passing through the strange, weathered mounds scattered across the valley mistook them for natural hills shaped by desert winds. No one imagined that buried beneath was one of the oldest cities on Earth, older even than many civilizations hailed as firsts in our history books. Not until the late 20th century did archaeologists, led by Ruth Shady, finally uncover the truth. What they found buried in the dust of time would rewrite the story of the Americas and force the world to reconsider what it thought it knew about the birth of civilization. Carroll rose, thrived, and faded in total anonymity. But now, after thousands of years of silence, its stones speak again, whispering of a peaceful, intelligent people who built something extraordinary in a place where life itself once seemed impossible. And this is only the beginning of their story. At first glance, the Soup Valley looked like a place forgotten by life. Winds whipped endlessly across the landscape. The sun scorched the earth until it cracked. The river, if it could even be called that, was little more than a silver thread, barely enough to nourish even the most stubborn life forms during the dry season. It was a place that seemed more fit for silence and stone than for civilization. But the people of Carroll saw something different. They didn't fight against nature. They listened to it. They watched its rhythms, the rising floods, the dry months, the path of the sun across the sky. They didn't conquer the land with force. They studied it, respected it, and adapted to it. Instead of building large dams or forcing the land into submission, they carved gentle channels into the stone, guiding the river's seasonal waters into irrigation canals. They used rock-lined trenches and earthen dikes to slow, store, and direct the flow. Water wasn't abundant, but every drop was honored and made to count. The result was an ingenious, handcrafted irrigation system that brought life to the desert. Cotton became their lifeline, used to weave fishing nets, create textiles, and fuel trade with coastal villages. Alongside it, they planted squash, beans, peppers, papayas, and drought-resistant crops that sustained them year-round. But Carroll did not thrive alone. Their survival depended on connection. They exchanged cotton, dried fruits, and woven goods for dried fish, seashells, exotic stones, and colorful marine ornaments from coastal communities. This was not conquest, it was cooperation. A quiet, reciprocal network of trade that stitched together an unlikely civilization. Carroll didn't try to bend the earth to their will. They learned to speak its language. They listened, and in return, the desert gave them a home. A place to flourish for over 1,000 years, in a land where life was never meant to bloom. At the heart of Carroll stands its most iconic structure, Pyramid Mayor. Towering nearly 60 feet high and stretching over 450 feet in length. It's roughly the size of a modern football field. This was no pile of rubble. It was a deliberate architectural feat built with precision and vision. Constructed entirely from stone, earth, and mud, the pyramid was reinforced with shikras, woven grass fiber bags filled with rocks, cleverly used to stabilize the massive internal volume. No steel, no concrete, and yet it has stood strong for nearly 5,000 years. What's more remarkable, there were no wheels. The terrain of Soup Valley simply didn't support carts. There were no metal tools, no beasts of burden to drag heavy stones. Everything, every rock, every sack of earth was moved by human hands. With wooden poles, slings, and sheer force of will, the people of Carroll built not with machines, but with unity. Thousands worked together, lifting in rhythm, carrying with shared purpose. Carroll was built from something invisible, collective will. And the design wasn't primitive. It was visionary. To survive earthquakes, the pyramids had flexible cores made from smaller stones mixed with clay. These absorbed seismic shocks, dispersing the energy safely. Terrace steps and angled walls allowed the structures to sway slightly during tremors, moving but never breaking. To combat the dry, wind-whipped climate, the pyramids were aligned with the sun and prevailing winds. Open-air courtyards and strategic vents created natural airflow and cooling. No modern insulation was needed. The buildings self-regulated their temperature, providing comfort for daily life and spiritual rituals alike. But these were not tombs like in Egypt. Carroll's pyramids were not built to bury kings, but to lift communities. They were sacred spaces, temples, gathering halls, ceremonial hubs. People climbed the broad steps not to honor death, but to celebrate life. Fires burned atop platforms. Voices rose in prayer. The pyramid wasn't just a structure. It was the spiritual pulse of the city. No wheels, no metal, but many hands and minds beating in unison. That is how Carol rose from the desert floor, not as a fortress, but as a beacon. An architectural testament not only to what humans can build, but to what they can believe in together. What sets Carol apart from nearly every other ancient civilization is not just its age or architectural genius, but its remarkable silence on the subject of war. In all the archaeological digs conducted across this desert city, no weapons have ever been found. No arrowheads, no stone knives, no spear tips, no remnants of conquest or defense. There are no fortified walls surrounding Carol. No moats, battlements, or towers. No signs of urgency to defend or repel invaders. Structures were not charred or toppled in battle. What remains today was not crushed by violence, but simply buried by the slow passing of time and wind. There are no mass graves, no evidence of massacres or communal violence. Human remains discovered at the site show careful, individual burials, often accompanied by ceremonial offerings. The bones are intact. There are no battle wounds, no fractured skulls or slashed ribs. This absence speaks louder than presence ever could. It tells us that Carol may have been a society that chose cooperation over conflict. And yet Carol was no isolated bubble. It thrived as a trading nexus. Cotton grown in its irrigated fields became fishing nets, woven textiles, and prized commodities. These were traded for dried fish from the coast, shells from the Pacific, rare stones from the Andes, and exotic fruits from distant valleys. But the trade was not enforced by strength. It was built on trust, mutual benefit, and cultural ties. At the spiritual core of this civilization was something even more revealing: music. Flutes carved from bird bones, drums stretched with animal hide, stone bells tuned to resonate with precision. These weren't toys. They were instruments of ceremony, tools of unity. In Carol, music was more than art. It was a language of harmony. Rituals filled with sound may have served as peaceful outlets for tension, binding the community through shared expression. While other civilizations rose through blood and conquest, Carol lasted nearly 1,000 years without war. No swords, no kingdoms forged in fire, just shared purpose and spiritual depth. It stands today as living proof that power doesn't have to come from weapons. Sometimes it comes from unity and the wisdom to build, not destroy. Amid the sun-scorched sands and wind-swept stones of Carol, archaeologists unearthed something that pulsed with unexpected life: music. Hidden beneath centuries of silence were flutes carved from condor bones, dual pipes finely tuned for pitch, and wind instruments precisely crafted to hold a tonal center. These were not primitive noisemakers. They were refined tools of acoustical art, testifying to a culture that valued sound not only as expression, but as connection. Drums stretched with deer hide, clay bells, instruments made from seashells, all point to a musical tradition that was both diverse and deeply spiritual. Music in Carol was not entertainment. It was sacred. It was communal. It was ritual. These instruments likely echoed during ceremonies, reverberating across plazas with notes of reverence, summoning not just attention but emotion, alignment, unity. The very architecture of Carol reinforces this. Sunken circular plazas, deep, round, carved into the desert earth, act as natural amphitheaters. Designed to project sound outward and evenly, they formed the heart of ceremonial life. People would gather here, hundreds at a time, forming concentric circles around a central sacred space. From this space rose song, dance, chanting, and offering. This was not performance, it was participation. Ritual belonged to everyone. Carol's spiritual worldview was woven into its architecture, its music, and its daily rhythms. Temples and plazas were aligned with astronomical markers: the rising and setting sun, lunar cycles, and star constellations. These alignments weren't accidental. They reflected a civilization intimately attuned to natural cycles. Their rituals were tied to sowing and harvesting, drought and flood, light and shadow. Carol's spirituality wasn't rooted in wrathful gods or conquest. It was rooted in harmony. There was no war deity, no altars soaked in sacrifice. Instead, the evidence speaks of a people who honored balance between human and cosmos, community and earth. And perhaps most profound, these rituals were not reserved for elites. They were communal, participatory, collective. In Carol, spirituality wasn't imposed, it was shared. Music, movement, and meaning bound people together, not just in ceremony, but in society. It was through these rituals, these resonant gatherings of flute and drum, that Carol spoke, not in proclamations of power, but in harmonies of hope. There were no royal tombs in Carol, no towering statues of kings, no murals glorifying bloodlines or singular rulers. Unlike Egypt with its pharaohs, or the Maya with their divine kings, Carol left behind no symbols of autocratic power. What it did leave was more radical: silence. A silence in the archaeological record where we would expect to find hierarchy. And in that silence lies a revelation. Every structure uncovered in Carol, pyramids, plazas, storage houses, temples, bears the imprint of communal purpose. Nothing in their scale or ornamentation privileges an individual. No singular name is carved into stone. The city's design tells a different story, not of rulers, but of roles. Excavations revealed distinct zones, areas for ceremonies, granaries, administrative rooms. There was organization, clear delegation of function. Someone managed the irrigation. Someone coordinated the construction. Someone led the rituals. But the absence of markers of elite dominance suggests these roles were functional, not exploitative. Carol was a society where responsibility did not mean supremacy. Here, cooperation replaced coercion. There were no palaces fortified with walls, no prisons, no armories. And yet, Carol thrived. For over a millennium, it sustained a sophisticated civilization, without a monarch, without a military class, without a ruling elite issuing decrees from on high. Instead, Carol appears to have been governed by consensus. Collective will, shared belief, mutual trust, these were its governing forces. Monumental architecture wasn't the result of slave labor or fear. It was the outcome of coordination, commitment, and community vision. What Carol achieved is staggering. A structured, prosperous society functioning without institutionalized violence or hierarchy. A civilization where roles existed, but rulers did not dominate. Where order didn't require swords. In a world where power so often grows from conquest, Carol's quiet strength challenges our assumptions. It suggests that social order can emerge not through domination, but through cooperation. That sometimes the most advanced societies are not the loudest, but the most balanced. Carol did not fall to swords or fire. Unlike other ancient cities whose ends are marked by the ruins of battle or the scars of invasion, Carol left no evidence of catastrophe. There were no mass graves, no fortresses burnt to the ground, no toppled monuments to violence. It did not vanish in bloodshed, it faded into silence. This silence, however, speaks volumes. Archaeological and climatic evidence points toward a slower undoing, one rooted not in conflict, but in climate. A prolonged drought may have swept through the Soup Valley, disrupting the seasonal floods on which Carol's agriculture depended. The delicate irrigation systems that once brought life through the fields ran dry. The river, once a silver thread of abundance, became unreliable. For a society built on harmony with nature, this imbalance proved overwhelming. The land itself may have turned against them. After centuries of farming, the soil could have become exhausted, its nutrients stripped away. Yields would have dropped. Cotton, their most prized commodity, grew sparse. Trade faltered, and with fewer goods to exchange, Carol's role in the vast network of inland and coastal communities began to shrink. Yet the people of Carol did not flee in panic. There are no signs of abrupt abandonment. No shattered temples, no rushed burials. Instead, it appears they left gradually, family by family, generation by generation, seeking new valleys, stronger rivers, and better chances. They did not leave a burning city behind. They left behind a whisper, empty plazas, silent pyramids, musical instruments half buried in sand. Carol's disappearance is not a tragedy. It is a lesson, a quiet yielding to forces beyond human control. One of the rare civilizations whose end was not written by war, but by the slow erosion of balance between human ambition and environmental limit. For 4,000 years, the city slept under desert winds, its silence echoing not defeat, but humility. And yet, its story was not over. For over 4 millennia, Cairo lay buried beneath wind-blown sand, its grand pyramids and plazas mistaken for nothing more than natural hills. Travelers passed by, unaware that beneath these mounds slept the oldest city in the Americas. A once thriving civilization reduced to silence and dust, forgotten not through conquest, but through time. That silence began to break in the 1990s. Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady, guided by instinct and curiosity, began excavating in the Soup Valley. What she and her team uncovered would rewrite history. Massive stone platforms, pyramids, sunken plazas, musical instruments, and the subtle fingerprints of a structured and vibrant society. It was not just a ruin, it was a revelation. Through carbon dating of organic remains, charcoal, seeds, woven fibers, they traced Carol's origins back to 2600 BCE. That meant this city had risen alongside ancient Egypt, predating Stonehenge and existing long before the great cities of the Maya or the Inca. Carol shattered assumptions. It stood as undeniable proof that the Americas were not latecomers to civilization. They had their own genesis, independent, complex, and equally ancient. Before Carol, scholars believed that advanced urban societies in the Americas only began with the Maya in Mesoamerica or the Inca in the Andes. Carol changed everything. Its age, scale, and organization revealed a continent whose civilizations had begun their journey far earlier than once thought. It challenged the idea that complex society emerged from a single cradle. It suggested that humanity's brilliance had many birthplaces. In 2009, UNESCO formally recognized Carol as a World Heritage Site, elevating this once-forgotten city to a symbol of global heritage. What was once just a barren stretch of sand now draws historians, scientists, and dreamers alike. Carol's ruins stand not only as stone remnants of the past, but as monuments to peace, ingenuity, and endurance. And through them, the ancient city speaks again, not in words, but in the quiet language of wind and stone, of memory and rediscovery. Carol stands as a living testament that civilization does not require conquest to flourish. It grew not behind fortress walls, not beneath the shadow of swords, but through harmony. No weapons have been found, no arrowheads or blades. No signs of burning cities, no mass graves. Its silence speaks not of suppression, but of peace. For nearly 1,000 years, Carol thrived, an extraordinary feat in the annals of human history. While other civilizations rose and fell through cycles of war, expansion, and collapse, Carol endured through something far rarer: sustained cooperation. It was trade, ritual, and social consensus, not bloodshed, that held this society together. Where others sought to dominate nature, Carol chose to understand it. The people learned to manage water with ingenuity, not brute force. They planted crops suited to drought. They built structures that withstood earthquakes, not with cement or steel, but with insight into the land beneath their feet. Their architecture was not just resilient, it was reverent. Their society thrived on shared responsibility. No pyramids to kings, no tombs to emperors. Power lay not in oppression, but in participation. Carol's strength came from the many, not the few, and it never fractured from within. In today's world, where conflict, inequality, and environmental exploitation have brought us to the brink, Carol offers an ancient yet timely lesson. It reminds us that greatness doesn't need to be loud. That civilization can begin not with conquest, but with trust. Not with domination, but with harmony. From 5,000 years ago, Carol speaks. Whispering through the wind-swept stones and sunken plazas, it offers not a warning, but a hope. A vision of what humanity once was and what it still could be. Carol left behind no tales of conquest, no stories of expansionist kings or battles won. Its legacy was not carved in blood or etched into victory monuments. Instead, it was whispered into stone, through pyramids, plazas, and ancient silence. These enduring structures still speak. We were here, and we lived in peace. Their music, their architecture, their communal life. This was Carol's true inheritance. The flutes carved from bird bone, the sunken plazas designed to carry song, the temples aligned with the stars. All of it a quiet message from a people who believed in something greater than themselves. Their buildings did not just shelter life, they expressed a philosophy, a reverence for nature, a celebration of unity, a society woven together not by power, but by purpose. Carol offers no blueprints for empire, but it does offer something far rarer, an alternative. A reminder that greatness can be measured not in how much one conquers, but in how deeply one understands. That a society can thrive not by dominating nature, but by listening to it. Not by ruling others, but by standing together. In a world drowning in noise, Carol chose to speak softly. It did not shout with war cries, but whispered with harmony. It did not raise empires, but raised ideas. And 5 millennia later, those stones still murmur beneath the desert wind, offering not glory, but wisdom. Carol doesn't stand as a relic of what was lost, but as a beacon of what remains possible. A civilization that didn't scream its might, but whispered its meaning. In the end, they left no empire, but they left something greater, a lesson for all humanity.